Gabimaru the Hollow came to this island searching for freedom, but instead he discovered something far more terrifying: immortal ancient beings, Lord Tensen. Sages ruling for over 1,000 years, reaching the pinnacle of Tao and surpassing human limits. But the deeper Gabimaru goes, the more disturbing the truth becomes. Because this island is a laboratory, a place where humans, monsters, and even the laws of life itself has been twisted in pursuit of immortality. But who exactly are the Lord Tensen? Where did they come from? And why is this island so important to the fate of the entire world? Well, today we're breaking down every single Tensen in Hell's Paradise, their powers, their tragic origins, and how one man, Gabimaru, eventually reached the same level as these so-called immortals. And so, to understand everything, we need to go back, way back, to over 1,000 years ago, around 219 to 210 BC. During the reign of China's first emperor of the Qin dynasty, an alchemist named Jofuku set sail in search of immortality. Just like the real-life legend of Zhu Jin, Emperor Qin Shi Huang feared death. Wanting the elixir of life, he sent Jofuku eastwards with massive amounts of resources, over 3,000 children from noble families and 100 craftsmen, amongst other treasures. Alongside Jofuku was his closest companion, not just an assistant, but the one person he truly cared about: his wife, Rien. When they arrived on the island of Kotaku, what we now know as Shinsenkyo, they expected to find immortality waiting for them. However, they found nothing. So Jofuku said, "Fine, I'll do it myself," and decided to make the elixir of life. Through alchemy and the principle of Taoism, he began experimenting, crossbreeding his crew members with all sorts of creatures. The result was the many monstrous species that now roam Kotaku. These are the failed attempts, all in pursuit of understanding Tao, the life energy that exists within all things. It carries elemental attributes and is governed by the balance of yin and yang, the constant search for the middle way. Mastering Tao is quite difficult, but if one succeeds, they gain divine powers and abilities. But Jofuku's true breakthrough came when he discovered Flower Tao, the energy derived from plants. It's so potent that it could grant extreme regeneration and longevity. Since he didn't have enough time to finish his research, Jofuku used Flower Tao to extend both his and Rien's lifespan. A tree can live for centuries or more, so a person with this can too as well. However, that's not the only thing Flower Tao had given them. With years of advanced knowledge, Rien created a Tao clone that she could control remotely. Then, by blending her own Tao with Flower Tao, she crafted an artificial life form named Mei. These extra hands were intended to give support to their research. Rien then produced 6 more of these plant-human hybrid babies, and together they became known as Lord Tensen. Since Jofuku was leading the research, Rien had all of them believe that he was their curator and grand master, when in reality they were just her clones. Sadly, decades later, everything would change when an elderly Jofuku finally died. Due to prolonged exposure to Flower Tao, his body started to mutate. Flowers sprouted from his flesh, his movements slowed, his mind drifted. Arborification had begun. Most who reach this state never recover. There is only one known exception, a state called hybridization or Majita, where instead of being consumed by Flower Tao, a human fuses their own Tao with it. In effect, they become like a pseudo-Tensen, but this can only happen at the brink of death, when Tao is no longer spent, and only if the person's will to survive is overwhelming. That is exactly what Gabimaru achieved. Driven by his desire to return to his wife, he resisted arborification. Likewise with Chobei, whose body accidentally managed to achieve a perfect balance of his Tao and the Flower Tao, all because of his desire to live for his brother. According to Rien, such a miracle had not been seen in over 1,000 years, suggesting that she and Jofuku once walked that same line. But even miracles have limits. Regenerate too much and arborification returns. Jofuku reached that limit. His body could no longer endure. The Tensens are never in this danger. Created through Flower Tao itself, their plant-based bodies are fully compatible. Unlike humans, their tanden, i.e. the point where Tao originates, isn't below the navel. It's within their ovule. Yeah, like a plant's reproductive system, which allows them to use Flower Tao freely without risking transformation. So what destroys a human sustains them. However, losing the love of her life left Rien completely heartbroken. To make matters worse, she too began to arborify. To avoid death and overusing her body, she operated solely through her Tao puppet clones. To other Tensens, she presented herself as a flawless immortal being, whilst her true body remained concealed. Jofuku's death changed her completely. She now wanted the elixir of life more than ever. Not for the Emperor, but to revive her husband. So to control the Tensens and guide them to her goals, she kept Jofuku's death a secret, telling them that their Grand Master is busy with his research. She then gilded his body to prevent decay, believing once the true elixir of life is perfected, she would be able to restore his soul. This brought Rien's focus back to the thousands of crew members and their descendants that originally came with Jofuku to the island. After experimenting on his fleet, those who were not turned into monsters would successfully gain some sort of longevity, living up to 1,000 years. They would be known as the Hoko, i.e. wood people, and reside within a small village. Throughout the years, their entire worldview, religion, and morality was fashioned by the Tensen's teaching of Taoism. They believed that the Grandmaster Senin ascended and split himself into 7 godlike beings who they worshipped. Eventually, though not exactly like Jofuku, their bodies would also undergo arborification, slowly turning them into trees. Before this transformation fully consumed them, they were instructed to travel to Horai. It was presented to them as a peaceful ascension, a form of nirvana. In reality, their Tao was sucked out dry to become the original source of Tan, a potent liquid that replenishes Tao, granting insane regeneration and longevity. Though seen as a prototype of the elixir of life, Tan, like Flower Tao, was unstable and toxic to humans, ultimately accelerating arborification. For the Tensens, however, Tan became a food source. Their Tao isn't perfectly self-sustaining, so absorbing it from others, much like drawing nectar, allows them to replenish what they lose and extend their longevity. But the Hoko were not endless. Over time, they died out. With their supply diminishing, the Tensens turned to another solution, luring outsiders to Kotaku. Whilst all creatures possess Tao, its purest form exists within humans. Unlike others, humans embody contradictions, yin and yang, in constant tension, making their Tao uniquely potent. And so, humans became the next source for producing Tan, bringing the Tensens one step closer to their true objective, the perfected elixir of life. This is where the story of Hell's Paradise begins. Not long after arriving on the island, Gabimaru learns of the immortal Lord Tensen and their overwhelming mastery of Tao, where each Tensen shares the same foundational abilities. First being Flower Tao regeneration. As long as their Tao remains intact, they can recover from injuries that would instantly kill a human. Severed limbs, pierced organs, even decapitation are not permanent. The only real way to kill them is by destroying their tandem, as losing a large amount over a short period can be fatal. The Tensens also possess immense physical strength, allowing them to overpower even highly trained warriors in direct combat. But what truly sets them apart is their insane ability to freely alternate their Tao between feminine yin and the masculine yang. By switching genders, the Tensen not only replenishes their lost Tao, but have different advantages. The male yang form is physically stronger with a greater muscle mass, whilst the female yin form gives a huge speed boost with better focus. This duality stems from their origins in Flower Tao, reflecting plants, in which over 90% contain both male and female reproductive parts. In battle, this mastery is paired with techniques such as Taote, an invisible projection of Tao energy, and Senjutsu, Tin Splinter, a wide-range variation capable of striking multiple targets at once. When pushed further, they can enter a second state known as Kishikai. In this form, their bodies expand into massive, monstrous plant-like figures, gaining additional abilities such as stingers that induces arborification. However, this transformation consumes an enormous amount of Tao. The Tensen have to turn back to normal after half an hour or else shrivel into an old, decrepit state. Beyond that, each Tensen has different expertise and philosophy when it comes to training their Tao, where they practice the 5 ways of immortality, which are Duin, meaning physical training, Daisuku, breathing techniques, Shuitsu, meditation, Shuten, i.e. anatomical studies, and finally, everyone's favorite, Bojujutsu. Yeah, the smashy smash. Alright, keep it PG, guys. But yes, these freaks are literally sleeping with their clone siblings. Yeah, I know, right? But as time goes on, every living being loses Tao, and there's only 2 ways to prevent that. This training is one of them, and it's called Nei Tanho. Cultivated over the past 1,000 years, this is what sustained the Tensen's immortality and reinforced their rule. The second way, of course, is creating the elixir of life, Gai Tanho. This latter process can grant immortality to anyone with 0 training. Rien's main goal is to bring back her dead husband, so she needs this special life juice. But you might be thinking here, if these legendary sages have mastered the first method, why even bother with Tan? Well, just because they can maintain their Tao, it doesn't mean they can gain more of it. Tan not only gives them a huge boost, but also can be life-saving if the Tensen lost a lot during a battle. Now, along with that, it's not like all of them are identical in power. Although they originate from Rien's essence and share the same voice, the Tensens are in fact distinct individuals. For instance, while Zhu Jin and Gui Fa shows no strong preference for a gender, Mei and Tao Fa prefers their female form, whilst Rien, Zhu Fa and Mudan favors being a man. But to really understand how they differ and split off, we have to break each of them down. In fact, let's begin with Mudan, the resident mad scientist. He is the second Tensen our gang faces, and the first they successfully kill. As Yuzuriha, Sagari and Senta confront him in the outer grounds of the Horai Palace. Like Rien, Mudan possesses Earth Tao, making him weak to Sagari's Wood Tao. He is also one of the most inventive Tensen, developing a combat style known as Hojutsu, or directional techniques. His Earth Yang Sky Pilgrim allows him to levitate and attack from above, whilst Earth Ying Night Pilgrim dampens his Tao, allowing him to vanish not only from sight, but from his opponent's awareness entirely. But like every Tensen, what makes them busted is his Kishikai form, which splits his elongated body into 2, producing flowers-shaped stingers that induces arborification. The same attack that ultimately led to Senta's death in Yuzuriha's arms. Speaking of, when she performed her ninjutsu, Mudan saw her potential in Tao and wanted to adopt her as his student, but primarily use her for Bojujutsu. Yeah, I know we got quite the freak here. As a master of Shuten, the study of anatomy, Mudan plays the part of a sadistic scientist, turning victims of arborification into Kyoshi, who are still completely human but lack any free will. He views them as toys, usually making them into chairs to sit on or makeshift bombs when he fights. My guy is basically Mayuri from Bleach, but with a depression. You see, whilst Mudan looks like an uncaring psycho, he has actually longed for death. Alongside Tao Fa, he helped to lure humans to the island, but doing so only prolonged their suffering. Through experimenting on humans, he came to realize that he was not so different, being empty, searching for meaning. In his final battle against Shion, Mudan witnessed something he could never achieve, a Tao that harmonized life and death. Seeing that balance, he died with a sense of clarity. But Mudan's influence did not end there. Gabimaru Gabimaru kept one of his stingers containing flower Tao, which he later then used on himself to gain a massive power-up. Once he harmonized achieving Majita, my boy became busted. But this brings us to Rien, a martial artist first, immortal wizard second. After Mudan's death, Rien was the first Tensen Gabimaru's party encountered during their final attack on Horai. Unlike the other Tensens, Rien focused obsessively on strengthening his physical body. Paired with his water attribute Tao, he became quite the fighter. But hey, having fluidity isn't enough. He needs to be unbreakable. And so Rien refines his Tao into a full body cloak of armor. Think of it like armament hockey from One Piece. This mastery allowed him to deflect Yuzuriha's attack, even though her earth Tao naturally counters his water. Besides his obsession with physical training though, Rien was devoted to his family, far more than the others, such that he would do anything to bring Mei back to the fold, even by force. Like Rien could also manipulate Tao of inorganic matter, allowing him to reshape the structure of Horai Palace itself. Acting as the architect, he used feng shui principles to rearrange the inner palaces, and he even tricked Gabimaru's group into believing they had reached Rien when they were actually inside his domain. It would be fair to say that Rien is probably the second strongest amongst the Tensen, right behind Rien. His Tao control, from dampening becoming near invisible to hardening turning invulnerable, makes him a complete unit. In fact, the only reason he took damage was because Gabimaru is hacked. Yep, his insane understanding of Tao turned Rien's energy against him. Throughout Gabimaru's time in this hell's paradise, he was picking up skills from everyone he fought and saw, making his mastery of Tao comparable to a Tensen. But what really makes Rien busted is, of course, again, his Kishikai state, transforming into a towering four-armed figure. Yes, he somewhat became a giant Sukuna. Even at this size, Rien was just as fast. He easily kept pace with Gabimaru and Yuzuriha, whilst shrugging off their attacks. However, this form drained his Tao, and so when Rien attempted to recover energy by switching his gender from Yang to Ying, Gabimaru had the opening he needed to attack, allowing Yuzuriha to crush his tendon. Just like Mudan and pretty much every Tensen, slicing the tendon with an opposing Tao is the off switch. Which brings us to Gui Fa and Tao Fa. Can't talk about one without the other. As a package deal, these twincests are the closest amongst the Tensen, representing the most intimate layer of the family dynamic. And this makes total sense because both of them are the Bocho Jutsu expert, even switching genders to maximize the pleasure. I mean Tao. As a complete pair, Gui Fa's fire attribute strengthens Tao Fa's wood, giving double the power of a single Tensen. Tao Fa also has a unique ability amongst them, where she can partially change one part of her body into the opposite sex. Like whilst maintaining her female yin form, she buffs her arms with yang. But the most unusual part of their power is their Kichikai transformation. Unlike the other Tensens, Gui Fa and Tao Fa cannot transform alone. They must fuse together, creating a towering Bulbasaur with wings and 4 heads, representing each of their yin and yang faces. This form has 2 states. Offensive mode, giving them immense speed, flight, sonic scream that ruptures eardrums, sharp whines, and laughing gas to mess with their opponent's head. Defensive mode surrounds them in thick vines that keeps enemy at a distance, almost reflecting Tao Fa's avoidant personality. Yep, their ability is only half the story. Gui Fa and Tao Fa represents the emotional fracture within the Tensen, because deep down, everything they believe in is a facade. After thousands of years of luring humans to harvest Tarn, the Tensens have grown tired of the cycle, all in pursuit of a perfect immortality that many of them no longer even believe will ever be achieved. You see, in reality, Tao Fa had always felt guilty over their cruel and insane practices, especially how the Hoko were used as food. She confided in Gui Fa, who felt the same. Yet, as the Hoko population declined, the Tensen faced a terrible reality. Without a source of Tao, they could eventually die. For Following Gui Fa's proposal, Tao Fa and Mudan prepared the bait that would lure humans to the island, sending a Hoko corpse drifting to the mainland. The guilt and her high empathy drove Tao Fa into insanity and depression. This is why she is always smiling. It's a coping mechanism to convince herself that everything is okay. Whilst Tao Fa smiles, Zhu Fa carries the anger, believing it is the world, not them, that has gone mad. But this facade was broken when OG Gantetsusai started to call them out on how they really love to toy with humans, even though that's not true. Ever since they were born, Zhu Fa and Tao Fa existed almost as one being, but in the end, they died, separated, with Gon Tetsusai cleaving their fused body apart. As Tao Fa faded away, Zhu Fa desperately reached for her. Chobei then just, pours water towel from Rien's laboratory over their bodies, preventing regeneration, allowing Gentetsusai to finish them both off. In the afterlife, Zhu Fa apologizes for failing to protect Tao Fa, but Tao Fa only smiles, embracing him, happy to have him as her partner. Next is Zhu Jin, the most active of the Tensen and their primary enforcer. Whilst others pursue philosophy or experimentation, Zhu Jin specializes in Taisoku, breathing exercises. But this dude cannot catch a breath in the series because everyone, and I mean everyone, hates his ass, especially his siblings who thinks he's trash. Being the first Tensen Gabimaru encounters and possessing water Tao, a natural hindrance to Gabi's fire attribute, made their fight one-sided, to the point our cat-like boy nearly died. Despite this, Gabimaru pushed him to his limits, forcing him to quickly finish the fight by entering their Kishikai form. However, Zhu Jin still fails to kill him, which gets them into a lot of trouble with the other Tensen. Zhu Fa was so disappointed he one-shots Zhu's head off. Sadly, this Tensen is the potential man of the group. His doubts and uncertainty in where they stand is reflected in the hibiscus flower, which constantly shifts form. Unlike some of the other Tensens, Zhu Jin frequently changes genders, never settling into one preference. Their Kishikai form resembles a massive hibiscus bloom, capable of unleashing devastating lightning through Tao. Uniquely, Zhu Jin can also partially transform, accessing their Kishikai lightning whilst retaining the speed of their normal smaller body. To top things off, like Rien and Rien, Zhu Jin can manipulate Tao of inanimate matter, even using corpse and Xion's own sword during combat. Being responsible for Tenza's death, Zhu Jin was the #1 target of Nurugai and Xion's quest for vengeance. When finally confronted, Xion cuts Zhu Jin 215 times, attempting to overwhelm their regeneration. But this wasn't enough, and that's thanks to a little something called the Bunko, Rien's pet project. So you know those flower pits around the island? Yeah, the Bunko is the biggest version of it. Rien needed Chobei's flower Tao to complete it, but in seeking recognition and validation from the other Tensen, Zhu Jin merged with it instead, becoming a complete monster. Inside the palace are the Bunko's 5 tendon, representing the 5 different elements, and capable of producing copies of each fallen Tensen. Working together, Gabimaru's group and Chobei destroys the Bunko's tendon from within the palace, whilst Jika delivers the final blow, ending Zhu Jin's rampage. With their defeat, the battle in Horai had already wiped out most of the Tensen, but one of them had been quietly watching everything unfold inside the palace, not as a warrior, but as the one responsible for protecting the future of the Tensens themselves. Bringing us to Gui Fa, the guardian of the basin flower pot, and the chamber hidden within Horai that stores the Tensen seed samples. In other words, he protects their future reincarnation. Yes, you heard that right. When a Tensen dies, their story isn't necessarily over. Though it takes 1,000 years, if the original ovule of a Tensen is placed inside the basin, they can eventually be reborn reborn with both their personality and memories intact. If a replica is used, well, they can still be reborn, but without their memories. So Gui Fa's job is very important, okay? And his personality fits the bill. You see, Gui Fa is the meditation expert, completely devoted to philosophy of Tao. Unlike the others, he is never shown fighting at all. Instead, their Tao manifests through illusions and projections, allowing them to observe events and communicate with the others from afar. However, after learning the truth about Rien's human past, about her being their creator clone, and her objectives on reviving the Grandmaster, who to his surprise had been dead all along, Gui Fa starts info dumping on our gang. He explains Rien's plan is to turn all of Japan into a giant flower garden of limitless Tan, all so she can revive the love of her life. To Gui Fa, who had always believed that life and death were indifferent, actions of going so far to bring back one soul made him really confused. But what hurt the most was Rien's exploitations of the Tensen for this goal. In the end, Gui Fa along with Mei were the only two Tensen who survived. When everything was finally over, Gui Fa gathers the plant ovules of the fallen Tensen so they may one day return, all of them except Rien, believing that after everything she had endured, it might be better for their creator to finally rest. And guess what? Centuries later, Gui Fa appears in the modern era alongside Mei, living quietly as an online teacher. Whilst Mei is still a tiny girl, he looks after her, and she informs him that Tao Fa and Zhu Fa have already sprouted, much earlier than they anticipated. So yeah, every one of these Tensen will eventually be back to live a normal life, as in reality, their entire existence was manipulated by Rien just for her selfish goals. The Tensen were not seen as people who have feelings, desires, or inner purpose. They were living just for the sake of living. But to understand how messed up their upbringing was, we now come to Rien, the leader and creator of the Tensen, the true immortal Shinsen. Whilst the others use Tao for regeneration, sensing weaknesses, or firing energy attacks, Rien controls the Tao of all things, both living and non-living, having complete mastery of the fundamentals of Tao. We see this firsthand when she sets sail to Japan to complete her mission in the accumulation of Tan. Gabimaru and the gang confront her in the middle of the sea, where Rien pilots an entire ship using Tao alone and prevents it from being destroyed. She's able to control the fire that was set upon it, all whilst making it move smoothly. Her Kishikai is probably the most unique amongst the rest. Unlike the others who transform into massive flower beasts, Rien takes on something far more divine. A six-armed figure with darker skin, a flower drum ring halo on her back like the thunder deity Rien, and of course a third eye, showing her enlightenment. In this state, Rien essentially flips the entire Tao system on its head. Normally attributes counter one another, like how Sariki's wood should have weakened Rien's earth. But in this Kishikai form, it doesn't matter. Attacks that should harm her just tickles. She also has stronger versions of the other Tensen's powers. Like Rien, she can control any matter but is more precise and can even stop flames from burning wood. Like Zhu Jin, she can unleash lightning. Like Mudan, she can trigger a barification but with a single touch. She also has Tao Fa's partial chi switching to make all 6 of her arms stronger with Yang, whilst she maintains her female yin form. But her biggest flex is definitely her Tao illusions. It's kinda like Gui Fa and Mei, but way better. Basically, it's on steroids. She pulled an Aizen level troll and convinced the whole main cast into thinking they were fighting her. But in reality, it's a Tao constructed puppet, piloted miles away from her room. This puppet alone was powerful enough to convince Jika, the man capable of seeing the truth of all things, to surrender and toast to humanity's end. My guy literally states that they can fight her 10,000 times and never win. That's how broken she is. Rien's puppet body is just a basic version of her Flower Tao power. Each time she died, what replaced her was a copy, and she can produce as many as she likes. However, she only acts through her puppets because the centuries have turned her into a walking corpse, suffering from the effects of urbarification. With her advanced version of Flower Tao, she was able to create the Tensens, each clone with unique personalities, elements, and powers. Mei was the first and then was the rest, and as she watched them grow, she always treated them as family, even though they didn't know she technically was Mama, because she fooled them into thinking that the Grandmaster was their creator. However, she took on the leader role, and when Gui Fa blasted Zhu Jin's head off for letting the humans run wild on the island, Rien tells Gui Fa to shut it because she was the only one allowed to punish any of them. And seriously, her punishments ain't a joke. After what she'd done to Mei, it had her running. Also, Rien is pretty much a psycho. When the Tensens were just little kids, she was assigning each of them with the 5 ways of immortality. She is the reasons why the twins Gui Fa and Tao Fa were sleeping together. Yes, they were coerced and technically forced to do so. After the death of Jufuku, Rien completely lost all sense of morality. Not only was she after bodily immortality, but the means to return his soul back from the dead, hence needing a whole country's worth of Tan. In her Renton palace and laboratory, she created the Banko, basically a very big version of the Wei Tanha flowers that were used for Tan production. Unfortunately for her, it wasn't stable until fortune smiled upon her, as the key to all Rien's plan came in the form of Aza Chobe, who survived being in a Tan pit and gained Flower Tao, and then helped make the first elixir of life. But Shija, Gabimaru's obsessed copycat, threw a wrench to her plans and destroyed all her ships except one. And after Zhu Jin's Banko form was destroyed, Rien took off in the last remaining one until she came across Shugin, the strongest Yamada executioner. She was totally not ready for Shugin's ability to alter his Tao attribute on the fly, something not even the ultimate being can do. So she focused her Tao to cut his dominant arm off. But her troubles were not over as Gabimaru and Sagari entered the battle. While Sagari attacked with her hindrance wood attribute, Gabimaru headed for Jufuku's body to destroy it and make Rien mad so she could lose control over her Tao. But before he sets fire to Jufuku, Gabimaru hesitates because on the floor were 2 wedding garments, reminding himself of his own love and marriage with his wife. So humanity's one and only chance to defeat Rien slips away until Shugin returns, declaring that a samurai's duty comes before everything. So he cuts Jufuku's body in half. This shatters Rien completely. Sagari seizes the opportunity and slices her puppet body apart. But even then, Rien regenerates and shoots a hole through her stomach. However, with Rien's human body coming near death's doors and now losing her only purpose in life with her husband, Rien rages out. She wants everything taken away from them. So she obliterates Gabimaru's hands and pierces through his chest. But instead of instantly killing him, she asks why. Why did he hesitate to destroy Jufuku's body? Gabimaru responds, saying that he was reminded of his wife's face and thought Rien must have felt what he did. With his words flashing right before her eyes, Rien sees her husband and their 1,000-year love story, being reminded of how they used to be and how she stood by Jufuku as he was dying from abortification. With one sign, Rien dispels her Tao puppets, turning it back to flowers, and allows her real body to die for good, ending her nightmare of love. Rien chose death over an empty eternity. But now we finally come to Mei, the first created Tensen and the most important ally of Gabimaru's party. That's because she is the reason everyone in the group knows about Tao in the first place and is basically the mentor of the series. Yep, just because she looks like a little girl, don't let that fool you. Mei is an OG, where unlike her younger siblings, she had a deeper understanding of emotions, free will, and of course, a guilty conscience. In truth, she was the acting real mother of the other Tensen, raising them up and teaching them empathy and how to live, until of course Rien corrupted them. Mei, like Tao Fa, felt extremely sickened by Rien's experiment of the Hoko people, and when she called her out for it, Rien punished her by breaking her plant ovule tendon and then had her chained up to be used for Bochujutsu with the Doshi monsters. Yeah, she was basically yeeted into a pit of monsters who would violate her every single day. As I said, Rien is a psycho evil witch and honestly can't be redeemed. Eventually, Mei escapes. However, due to her broken tendon, her Tao doesn't recover, turning her into a little child to maintain life. This is where she meets a Hoko named, well, Hoko. Being the last of his people, he raises Mei like a daughter. For over 500 years, she lived quietly until Gabimaru and Sagari arrived. She bonded with them and joined their crew to attack Horai. However, her main goal was to see Rien and the Grandmaster one last time before leaving the island to live a normal life. Sadly, after using too much Tao, her father figure Hoko sacrificed his life in order to save her. This gave her the determination to move forwards. During the final battle, to chase Rien, the group discovers one buried ship under wreckage. So Mei activates her Kishikai form, becoming a massive butterfly with 5 petal-like wings. Her powerful flaps instantly clears the wreckage and frees the ship so the others can stop Rien and save Japan. Once again, she had risked her life to help her new family, as staying in this form too long would have killed her. However, this was her act of atonement for running away, being a coward and allowing Rien and the Tensens to ruin their lives. Unlike the others who pursued immortality by consuming human life, Mei chose to risk her own to save others. But her story doesn't end here. Centuries later, in the modern world, Gui Fa lives quietly as a teacher, and helping them is Mei, now raising the next generation of Tensen just like when she began her story. Only this time, they may grow into something very different, kinder, and hopefully find true meaning and happiness in life. But we ain't done yet, because even though these two are not technically Tensen, we still have to talk about Gabimaru and Chobei. During their hunt for the elixir of life, they both had pushed their bodies to the absolute limit just to survive within Hell's Paradise, and in doing so, they achieved something almost impossible. Quite similar to Rien and Jifuku long ago, they fused the human Tao with flower Tao, a state known as hybridization, a perfect balance between human life energy and the power of the Wei Tanho flowers. And the first one to achieve it was Aza Chobei. After being thrown in a Tan pit and left for dead, Chobei's body accidentally stabilized the fusion between his Tao and flower Tao. So instead of turning into a flower like every other victim, he adapted. His body began regenerating automatically, just like the Tensens. But this power came with a cost. Every time Chobei regenerates, the vines inside his body tried to consume him, threatening to turn him into a plant through arborification. And just like the Tensens, if his plant ovule inside his Tandan is destroyed, then yep, he dies. Still, Chobei had essentially become a human version of the Tensen. His story, however, doesn't end. After exhausting himself in battle, Chobei eventually does die, leaving his younger brother Toma devastated. Gui Fa offers Toma one final chance, using the basin, the same tool that allowed the Tensens to reincarnate, and hence he is reborn. After escaping the island together, Chobei and Toma disappears into the outside world, eventually causing chaos across Asia's underworld. But remember, Chobei wasn't the only one to evolve, as during his battle with Rien, Gabimaru reached the brink of death. In a desperate gamble, he injected himself with Mudan's flower Tao stinger. Instead of dying, Gabimaru stabilized the fusion. His body began regenerating automatically, allowing him to survive injuries that would kill any normal human. For the first time, Gabimaru had stepped into the same realm as the Tensens. But unlike Chobei, Gabimaru's body hadn't fully adapted to flower Tao, which means his future immortality remains uncertain, as the flower Tao within him might have been temporary. But what is certain is that the man once known as Gabimaru the Hollow had evolved far beyond the weapon he was raised to be, but no longer needed the power, turning back to his wife to live peacefully. Shout out to everyone that actually reached the end. Hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Make sure to smash the like button and comment down below to show your love and support. And of course, for more peak fiction, watch this next.